guys really have any chance of being an all-star. I just, that's so much money. I understand they have to spend it, but, I like their team. I think they could be a playoff team next year, but man, Jason, that just felt like they spent an awful lot of money for a lot of guys who don't really move the needle for me too much.
I'm going to call the Kings losers in this free agency, but for the first time in a while, they have a semblance of a young core in Heald and Fox. So
Absolutely.
they're just so that's why. All right, I'm not going to knock the Ariza signing because he's an excellent locker room presence, and I think he's a good veteran to kind of make sure these kids stay in line. I don't get the Dedmon signing, even after it looks like the Kings are going to lose Cauley Stein, and then Barnes is kind of their scoring wing that complements Heald and Fox. So I don't hate the moves. I hate the money, if that makes sense.
It
So I think
does.
they
Yeah.
overspent, but like you said, I mean, I think every team in the West outside of maybe Memphis, um, and the Suns could potentially compete for a playoff spot next year. So,
There was
I mean,
just two. I mean, I think the other thing that kind of made me scratch my head, Jason, was that I understand some of these moves, but Harrison Barnes is really better at the 4 than the 3, and you already have Marvin Bagley. So in and of itself, that was kind of challenging. But you also have Nemanja Bjelica, Harry Giles, who you're hoping to play a little 4. Maybe he'll play some 5 too. I mean, I think that's the hope. But then you get Rashawn Holmes, who's going to play a little 4, a little 5. I just, it doesn't feel super well thought out. I'm not sure how those guys are going to put it together, but let's see. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for now. I thought that there was a couple teams that were big losers, Jason. The first one for me was the Magic. I felt like this was the classic example of a team who makes the playoffs and gets way too excited about it. Way too excited about basically getting a gentleman's sweep. Um, and then pays an inordinate sum of money to bring back a core that's not going to get them anywhere, quite frankly. And that involved re-signing Nikola Vucevic for whew, a 4-year, $100 million contract. That's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow. Al Farouk Aminu for 3 years, $29 million. I'm not sure how that's going to work out for them with a lot of other guys who are going to play the same role. And then Terrence Ross, maybe the coup de grace here. 4 years, $54 million. Perhaps, I think Bojan Bogdanovic is up there as one of the worst deals handed out this summer. I think Terrence Ross at 454 is a tight contender for that. That looks like it could be a disastrous contract. And Aminu could be as well if he doesn't get to play because, Jason, Aaron Gordon and Jonathan Isaac are ahead of him in the pecking order. So I'm not sure if that means that Aminu is going to play the 3 for this team, but I'm just not seeing where they're giving him minutes. So I have no idea why they opted to pay him $30 million to be their ninth man. That was one of the most befuddling moves of the offseason for me.
you think that the Pacers have a big man problem? The Magic are all front court, no back court. I mean, where's the minutes for Mo Bamba? They drafted him in the lottery for him to ride the bench for 2 years. Makes zero sense to me. I mean, I get Vucevic wanted to stay. I thought he would have been a better fit in Boston than Cantor, but I guess the Celtics didn't want to pay a max salary for him. I don't get the Aminu signing at all. Terrence Ross at least has been there, but I still think they need guard help. And, the Magic, for them making the playoffs I think they were the 7th seed this past season. They took a step backward, in my opinion. So definite losers for the Magic, even though I really do love Disney World.
Yeah, I just, when you look at their cap sheet for the next few years, Jason, the thing that really gets you here is that they've now pretty much, the team we're about to talk about, who I think everyone already knows who the big offseason loser was, but one of the things that they did was lock themselves into a core that really had no chance of getting better. And I feel like that's exactly what the Magic have done with their team. There's no path to the Magic being a 4 seed. It doesn't exist. There's no way that they are going to move up in the standings. I think it's more likely that they miss the playoffs next year after committing all this money than that they move up in the playoff standings. I think teams below them got better. I think they're at about the same spot. And that's exactly what the Charlotte Hornets, Jason, have done for the past few years. And it really finally bit them. I mean, obviously their bad contracts were already there, but they had about as bad an offseason as you could. They end up getting nothing for Kemba Walker. And now, Jason, they are left with, well, nothing. They lose their first and second best players from last season. Jeremy Lamb gets a sweetheart deal to go to Indiana. He was their second best player last year. They replace Kemba with Terry Rozier, who, very unclear if he's a starting caliber point guard. Charlotte is paying him like he is a borderline all-star. And that feels generous. 3 years, almost $60 million. That's going to be tough for him to live up to, Jason. And I don't see any upside in that contract for them. I mean, if he is as good as he could possibly be, he will still be just properly paid on that deal. Meanwhile, the rest of the roster is an absolute disaster. I mean, I think the Hornets have to have pole position for that number one lottery spot coming into next year.
Yeah, losing Walker is tough. I mean, I know they're getting Rozier, but massively, massively overpaid. And they pretty much have nothing going for them. You said they lost Lamb, they lost Kemba for nothing when they probably should have traded him. I think Jordan probably thought he would have been able to maybe re-sign him and that he wanted that max deal to stay with the Hornets. But that just goes to show the direction the franchise is heading in. If a player of Walker's character walks out the door and you bring in a enigmatic Terry Rozier, your franchise is going absolutely nowhere. So clear losers, Knicks, Kings, Magic, Hornets, and holy tomatoes. I can't believe it.
Can I just want to dedicate my zero of the week to Charlotte, because I have to take a minute to just say, you know, when you look at this team, this is the example of poor management, complete and utter mismanagement, Jason. And as a fan of a team that just consistently does similar kind of stupid things, I mean, typically the Bulls don't pay enough money to get themselves into this sort of predicament. But the decisions made here are inane, they are stupid, and they are self-defeating. And when you look at what the Hornets have done, they overpay a guy like Batum, and then in turn are unable to pay Kemba Walker. But it's other little things here that I think really get me. The deal for guys like getting Biyombo, I mean, some of these other contracts just terrible. The decision to keep Marvin Williams was a disaster from the minute they signed it. Cody Zeller, similarly, just a disastrous contract the moment they signed it. And then this decision not to trade Kemba Walker, I feel like people have really underrated how terrible that decision was now. Because not only do you get absolutely nothing for him, but you also actually hurt yourself by losing the draft opportunity. There's an opportunity cost of keeping him, which is that you're now better. So you lose out on getting a good draft pick last year, and they end up with P.J. Washington. Now, you look at a team like the Pelicans, who did the opposite here and benched their guy. What happens to them, Jason? Well, they end up winning the lottery and getting Zion Williamson. Meanwhile, the short-sighted Hornets, they play through the season, and what happens? They play themselves into a terrible draft pick. So what ends up happening is that they end up with nothing to show for their player, more wins and therefore a worse draft pick, and a cadre of absolutely horrendous contracts across the roster, and they just added to it with the Terry Rozier one. I mean, I can't remember a more inept series of moves. I mean, you can look at deals, and we talked about the Nets and where they came from. There's bad moves that are made to try and win a title, and you can make the case that if everything had broken right for the Nets, that they were a title contender. The thing that's so frustrating to me about what the Hornets are doing is that they've never, for one moment, even had the remotest chance at being a contender, and yet they continuously, frivolously spend their money on players who don't fit their current timetable, don't complement their best player, and leave themselves in position to have no chance at either rebuilding or having any significant chance at a championship or even a deep playoff run. So, to me, Jason, they deserve the zero of the week for their just consistent mismanagement. And if it were not for James Dolan, I think you could make the case that right now Michael Jordan has done the worst job of any NBA owner in the league.
Preach, brother. And while you're fired up, we'd be remiss if we didn't do a little bit of Ben's Bulls Bonanza, given everything going on in free agency. So I'm going to put the spotlight on you. We probably spent a half an hour on the Nets. So we got to get to the Bulls a little bit. They get Thaddeus Young on a $30 million deal. They bring back Arcidiacono, and they get a guy, Luke Cornett, to back up Carter. So your thoughts on the Bulls offseason thus far?
It's fine. I mean, I can't say I have very strong feelings. I liked. I think I like the Satoransky move. That's the one that I'm interested in to see what happens there. I'm interested to see what that's gonna mean for Chris Dunn. I feel like they may have overpaid him just a bit. I feel like $30 million seems like an awful lot. I like him as a player. I'm really interested to see what he does. I think that could end up being a kind of a bad deal depending on how he plays, but I'm curious to see how he plays and what they do with that. I mean, at the end of the day, Thaddeus Young, good player. I'm not sure that I would have done that move. I probably would have done just what we had prescribed for the Knicks. I would have rather just kind of used this cap space, taken on some bad deals, gotten some picks for it. But fine, sure, Thaddeus Young, good player. Should be good for the Bulls. I like that they kept Arcidiacono, but I mean, again, Jason, I mean, it comes down and this is really the fate that many NBA teams face. It's all going to be about the development of their young guys. If Kobe White pops, if Markkanen has a big year, Carter plays well, Levine continues to grow, this will be a good team. And if not, they won't be. At this point, the Bulls just aren't very relevant. The moves in this offseason are, again, they're fine, but they're not really going to move the needle. I'm not sure where the Bulls are going. I probably, like I said, would have rather gotten some picks, been able to use that cap space to absorb something or be part of a three-way deal to get some additional draft compensation. But, in a vacuum, I'd say they're fine.
Well, there you have it, folks. That is your Chicago Bulls analysis because, I mean, I think in another year we'll get a clearer picture of where the Bulls rebuild's heading. Like you said, if White pops, if Carter and Markkanen and Dunn and Levine all take steps forward, then the Bulls could have a nice young core and could eventually be in that class of up-and-coming teams in the Eastern Conference. But right now, you probably put them as like the 12th or 13th best team. I think the Hornets are worse. I don't know what the Magic are going to look like if they can, bring back last season's success and then the Knicks. So I'd probably put the Bulls around 12th in the pecking order. But before we get to the meat and potatoes, our co-heat check to end the show, a couple quick hits here, more moves that were made. The Suns get Ricky Rubio. They give him $51 million over 3 years. And Ben, you like that move, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I actually thought this was one of the moves that I was surprised by the reaction. Generally, I get why people like or dislike moves. I actually thought that the Ricky Rubio signing was really nice for the Suns. I thought that was a rare moment of clear thinking for the Suns front office because I think Rubio is an excellent complement to Booker. I think that they really should pair well together. He covers up for a lot of the issues that Booker has. He should be able to get Booker the ball in spots that he needs it to, but he can also run the offense. He's a very good defensive player. I think he will pair very nicely with Ayton. I think that's a really nice fit. And you know what? I'm going to give the Suns credit. I'm surprised that I'm saying this, but you know what? I might not agree with the vision that they're going with, but this move felt consistent with the other moves that they made. They got Frank Kaminsky. They got some guys who can stretch the floor around their other players in the draft. They clearly made a concerted effort to get some shooting. I kind of like the Rubio move in that context, that they now have a guy who can get the ball around to some of these other guys who are more, three-point shooting type team. I mean, this is a team that can now go in transition, really space the floor, and I think Rubio's really well suited to be the point guard of a team like that. And so I like it. I think it's a good fit, and I felt like maybe it got a little too much criticism just because they're the Suns. I think that could be a good move at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think the Kaminsky move is a bit of an underrated signing. I think he can still play, just wasn't in the best situation with Charlotte, he kind of fell out of favor. They had Zeller there. They drafted a lot of